Good day, brothers. I would like to have been with you this weekend in New Orleans, but trust me when I tell you that I'm there in spirit. This past January 24th, a giant in our fraternity entered the chapter eternal. Perhaps no brother that I have ever known has done more to impact the lives of so many in our fraternity. Dave DeVol was an icon, and he was a brother among brothers. I had the honor and the extreme privilege, at the request of the family, to deliver Dave's eulogy in San Diego on February 19th of this year. Today, I would like to share with the entire brotherhood a few excerpts from the eulogy I delivered in San Diego, perhaps to open a window for each of you in terms of how Dave impacted your life. Some of you here today have known Dave for many years. Others of you have never had the opportunity to meet him. But hopefully I can give you some insights into who he was, what he was all about, and how he impacted our fraternity like very few others in our history. Here are a few highlights from that eulogy. Good afternoon. My name is Dick Elder. On behalf of Kay, Mark, Dana, Susan, Sherry, Elle, David, and Charles, I want to express our sincere appreciation and thanks for joining us today in the sharing and the celebration of Dave's life and how he touched each of us. As I reflected over the past several days and began really thinking about what I might share about Dave Eugene DeVol, I ultimately determined that it was important to share his passions and how one or more of those passions in some way may have touched you personally. I wanted to open a few windows of my personal journey with Dave and share a few of our adventures together as well. And thus, hopefully, in some way, capture the essence of how his life graced us all. It is also important for you to know Dave DeVol was my mentor, my life coach, and in fact, Dave was my superhero. Our first meeting is extremely vivid in my mind. It occurred in early September of 1969, at an event known as the Preferential Dinner. It was held at the home of Hal Clement's parents. Al Coupé, the longtime San Diego sports anchor, was the guest speaker. The dinner was to formally introduce the newly minted pledges of Theta Chi fraternity to the officers and the chapter advisor. Dave served as the chapter advisor at that time. He introduced himself to me and immediately said, "Here, let me fix you up." He then proceeded to straighten my tie, fix the collar of my newly purchased $4.50 Goodwill blue blazer that I had picked up earlier that day. He then said, "Here, I'll fix you up." And little did I know that those first words, "Here, let me help you, I'll fix you up," would ring in my ears for the next 55 years. I did not know what to think. Dave was buttoned up, handsome, impeccably dressed. He had an air about him that told me this person is like no one I had ever met before. For many of these past 55 years, I was fondly called by Dave as his project. At a dinner function some years later, when Dave was sharing with others how we met, he commented and said that when I first met Dick Elder, he was a complete train wreck. Some of you here today who knew me then would probably agree with his assessment. Fast forward 44 years to 2012. I had the honor and the great fortune to be elected the International President of Theta Chi, the second man from San Diego in the 168 years of the fraternity's history. Dave was the first. On the day I was elected, I heard that familiar voice and looked up to see that the person administering the oath of office to me was the same man that I had had that dinner with so many years before. A few minutes later, he was pinning this badge on my chest, and with both of us having tears in our eyes, he said to me, "Here, let me help you with that. I'll fix you up." I can honestly say that most of the positive decisions I have made in my adult life since that first meeting 55 years ago were in some way influenced by Dave DeVol. Dave had several passions in his life that I would like to share with you. The most important of those passions, by far, was his family. His son Mark, his daughters Dana and Susan. He cherished them all. But most important to Dave was his bride, Kay. I never once ever heard Dave refer to Kay as anyone but his bride. Let me introduce you to my bride. Let me check with my bride. I need to touch base with my bride. Kay, you were the joy of his life. When Terry and I got married nearly 50 years ago, Dave and Kay attended a reception at the home of my parents in Orange County right after we got married. Dave pulled me aside and said the two of us really outkicked our coverage. In fact, I think you and I may have married two of the best-looking blondes on the planet. Dave's beautiful bride, Kay, with her ever-present Doris Day smile, was Dave's most cherished person in his life. From the time of their first meeting at freshman orientation in 1955 and every day since, through it all, in success and health, joy, laughter, struggle, and fun, laughing and scratching for 68 years. Kay, you were his rock. You were his greatest passion. You were his bride. Your love story was one of God's blessings. For you, Kay, to have lived it, and for all of us to have witnessed it. Family was the center of Dave's universe. Another of Dave's passions were his friendships. Whether you saw him or communicated with him regularly or only once in a while, he would always greet you with a warm smile and inquire, "How is the family? How are you feeling? How are you doing? What have you been up to?" He genuinely wanted to know how you were and excited to share in your accomplishments, big or small. He was equally comfortable with older people as well as younger people. He could relate with young people, showing an interest in their lives and their dreams. Dave cherished his friendships and valued each and every one of those relationships from the heart. Another passion for Dave DeVol was this city, San Diego. He loved San Diego, for him, the greatest place in the world. He was an avid jogger, and the city was his beautiful sanctuary for those many hours he enjoyed running on its streets with the sea breeze in the air. He was a long-standing member of the University Club, an active Rotarian, and a leader in his community. Dave loved being from and living his whole life right here in San Diego. Dave had a passion for his alma mater, San Diego State, for his entire adult life. He enrolled at San Diego State College, as it was called then, in 1955, and immediately took on leadership roles within the university. Elected as freshman class president, he also served as junior class president. Prior to graduation in 1959, Dave was recognized on campus and was named a who's who in American colleges and universities his senior year. He also served as president of the San Diego State University Alumni Association and president of the SDSU Athletic Foundation. He believed in the great potential of young people and fostered alumni involvement for the preservation and growth of his university. Dave DeVol was an Aztec through and through. Dave was clearly a product of growing up in the 1950s, from the Buddy Holly glasses to the two-tone saddle shoes. Dave was handsome, sharp, and styling. At college in the 1950s, it was common to put as many people in a phone booth as possible, building homecoming floats for the parade and end songs or congratulatory comments with a rousing hip hip hooray. This particular fad had long since faded from existence in social circles, but not for Dave. One particular Theta Chi convention I attended with Dave was a case in point. At the end of the closing banquet, it was customary to sing the fraternity theme song. When ended, I heard from the back of the room, "Hip hip," and then a few voices. "Hooray." Then again, "Hip hip," only louder this time. A few more hoorays, and once again and again, "Hip hip," until over 700 voices at the top of their lungs were answering back, "Hooray," to each of his hip hip cheers. Out came his Cheshire grin as he pulled me aside and said, "I told you these young people could learn something." I think Mark, Dana, and Susan would agree with me when I say that their dad would never be identified as a technology early adopter. For Dave, Facebook was a coffee table book of family pictures, and a podcast was something that molten steel was poured into to form a part of his beloved narrow gauge railroad trains. I asked Dave once if he was aware of AI. He commented that he'd heard of it and thought it was a disease that was running through the SAE house. Life always had a lot of black and white TV for Dave. But as he grew older, he started wearing more stylish wire-rimmed glasses. He saw more color. He began to understand that after a little rain, the sun graced the sky with a rainbow. And with Susan and Elle's help, he became to embrace the joy and love of the rainbows that came into his life. His passion and growth for the development of young people manifested itself in his nearly 70-year affiliation and membership with his fraternity, Theta Chi. As an undergraduate, he held several chapter offices at his Gamma Theta chapter. In 1959, he was nominated for the Colley Award, recognizing Theta Chi's most outstanding undergraduate in the nation. His Gamma Theta chapter at San Diego State and its brothers were most dear to his heart. Upon graduation, he served as a regional counselor in California, advising and guiding numerous chapters throughout the state. In 1968, at the age of 30, he was elected to the National Board of Directors, becoming one of the youngest members ever elected to that board. In 1978, he was elected to the fraternity's highest office as International President. In 2013, Dave was bestowed with the revered title of the Grand Old Man of Theta Chi. This title had only been held by one man in the 168 years of the fraternity's existence. The first was Dr. Robert Irish, class of 1889, Norwich University, Norwich, Vermont. So recognized in 1932, Dave was the second. Over those 7 decades, Dave was the consummate volunteer leader. In fact, the International Award for Volunteer Service is named after him. He has been recognized over the years with every award and recognition the fraternity has to offer, including its highest honor, the Distinguished Service Award. Dave loved his fraternity association. He was one of its most outstanding leaders, and his wisdom was sought by virtually every volunteer and professional staff member for over 5 generations of Theta Chi's. Dave DeVol, throughout his life, was a pillar by which others were measured. And yet, for all of his accomplishments, recognitions, awards, and honors bestowed upon him from the many organizations, associations, and institutions he was a part of, he remained both humble and self-effacing in all that he did. Dave was one of the most humble people I've ever known. His fingerprints and his legacy graced the lives of people in every passion and community that he touched: his family, his friends, his city, his university, his fraternity. I will close my comments this afternoon with the words of our fraternity creed. Dave recited these words literally thousands of times, both in public and in private. These words, I believe, were his guide throughout his adult life. He embraced them, he embodied them, and he lived them. The creed. I believe in Theta Chi, its traditions and its ideals. Born of sturdy manhood, nurtured by resolute men, ennobled by high and sacred purpose. It has taken its place among the educational institutions of America as a promoter of knowledge, an advancer of culture, and a builder of character. It inspires true friendship, teaches truth, temperance, and tolerance, extols virtue, exacts harmony, and extends a helping hand to all who seek it. I believe in the primacy of alma mater, in the usefulness of my fraternity, in its influence and its accomplishments, and I shall do all in my power to perpetuate its ideals, thereby serving my God, my country, and my fellow man. You have served them all well, my friend and my brother. You have earned your rest. May God speed. Hip, hip. Thank you, brothers.